Before we open today's file, consider subscribing to Ancient Food Files. Every episode uncovers the hidden histories of remarkable plants, forgotten foods, and the unexpected ways they have shaped human civilization. If stories like these fascinate you, you're in the right archive. Before you continue watching, please check the link I provided in this video's description. That way, you can verify it yourself. In 2010, botanists working in the limestone forests of northern Vietnam identified a new species of slipper orchid. It had a mottled, pouch-shaped bloom unlike anything else recorded in its genus. Word of the discovery reached collectors before it reached most conservation databases. Within 6 months, it was gone. Not endangered, not declining, gone. Every known wild population stripped bare, harvested by the kilogram and sold off cheaply to dealers who broke the plants apart and resold them individually, some for hundreds of dollars each. The forest where it grew is still standing today. It is simply empty of the one thing that made it remarkable. This is the vault file on the plant known as nature's slipper, and the black market that formed around the very laws meant to save it. Every file in this archive concerns a plant that was trusted, studied, and then lost to the systems built around it. This file is unusual because the system in question was not indifference or neglect. It was a well-intentioned international treaty, and the market it inadvertently created. Paphiopedilum, the genus known as the Venus slipper or lady slipper orchid, comprises roughly 80 accepted species native to the forests of tropical Asia, most concentrated in Southeast Asia, southern China, and the Himalayan foothills. Every species in the genus is protected under the highest tier of international wildlife trade law, and every species in the genus remains, to this day, a target of an active illegal trade that the protection itself helped shape. Paphiopedilum species grow in narrow, specific habitat pockets, limestone cliffs, cloud forest understories, single valleys or ridgelines, often restricted to just one or a handful of known wild locations on Earth. This is not incidental to the story. It is the central vulnerability. A plant that exists in one place, and nowhere else, can be entirely removed from the wild in a single harvesting trip. Local collectors in these regions have often gathered orchids for generations, originally for regional trade and personal cultivation. What changed was not the practice, but the scale and reach of the buyers on the other end of it. Paphiopedilum's most distinctive feature is the pouch-shaped labellum, the slipper the genus is named for. Unlike many flowering plants, it offers no nectar reward. Insects are lured in by the pouch's shape and coloring, slip inside, and find only a narrow, one-way exit path engineered to brush them against the flower's reproductive structures on the way out. It is a flower built entirely on deception, with no payment for the pollinator's trouble. This same biology makes the genus difficult to conserve. Paphiopedilum species grow slowly, often depend on specific mycorrhizal fungi in the soil to germinate at all, and can take years to reach flowering maturity from seed. A wild population stripped by collectors does not simply regrow the following season. In many cases, it does not regrow at all. The demand for this genus is not new. In Victorian Europe, an obsession collectors called orchidelirium drove expeditions across the tropics specifically to locate and extract rare species, with newly discovered slipper orchids fetching enormous sums at European auction houses. Entire habitats were stripped in that era for a single spectacular specimen destined for a private greenhouse. That pattern of demand never fully ended. It was legally interrupted in 1975, when the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, CITES, came into force, and the entire genus Paphiopedilum was placed under its strictest protection. Appendix I, prohibiting international commercial trade in wild collected specimens entirely. Here is where the file complicates itself. The protection did not end the trade. In several documented cases, it appears to have accelerated it. Botanical trade researchers have documented that in the lead-up to CITES protection listings, collection activity for at-risk orchid genera has surged, collectors racing to extract specimens before legal access closed entirely. After a listing takes effect, black market prices for the newly restricted species tend to rise, since legitimate supply is cut off precisely as demand, driven by rarity itself, increases. Legal nurseries attempting to propagate species for conservation purposes have, at points, found it harder to access wild genetic stock than the smugglers working outside the law. The Paphiopedilum canhi case is the clearest evidence in the file. Discovered in 2010, prized immediately for its unusual coloring, it was reduced to near nothing in the wild within 6 months, much of the demand driven by online marketplaces and social media, where sellers used hashtags openly to advertise. wild collected specimens to buyers who understood exactly what that phrase meant. Confiscation records from institutions like the San Diego Zoo's Plant Rescue Center, established in 1988 specifically to receive orchids seized at borders, document decades of smuggled Paphiopedilum arriving dehydrated, wrapped in newspaper, packed into hand luggage. The law created the rarity. The rarity created the price. The price ensured the smuggling never stopped. Conservationists and researchers have since documented this feedback loop directly. Studies of the international orchid trade estimate that a meaningful share of active traders and collectors have knowingly participated in smuggling or laundering wild specimens, treating sites documentation as an obstacle to root around rather than a rule to follow. In the wrong hands, as a map for exactly the kind of harvesting that erased Paphiopedilum canhi within half a year of its first description. Meanwhile, licensed artificial propagation and micropropagation programs have expanded specifically to undercut wild collection demand, an attempt to supply the market with legally cultivated plants indistinguishable in beauty from their wild stripped counterparts, without requiring a single wild population to be touched. There is a particular kind of loss recorded in this file that has nothing to do with extinction in the abstract. It is the specific image of a rescued orchid arriving at a conservation greenhouse dehydrated and wrapped in newspaper, alive, but pulled from a system built to erase the very rarity that made it worth saving in the first place. The forests these orchids came from remain. What is missing is not the habitat, it is the plant the habitat was known for. And, in cases like Paphiopedilum canhi, the wild population itself, a species now surviving almost entirely in cultivation, dependent on human collections for its continued existence in any form at all. The trade has not slowed. Illegally harvested Paphiopedilum specimens continue to surface on e-commerce platforms and social media, often marketed under hashtags aimed directly at collectors who understand the coded language of wild collected listings. Enforcement remains difficult. Plants are far easier to disguise and transport than live animals, and the sheer number of Paphiopedilum species, combined with their visual similarity to related genera, makes identification at a border checkpoint a genuinely difficult task even for trained officials. Legal, cultivated Paphiopedilum remain widely available to collectors through proper nurseries, proof that the demand for this flower's beauty does not require a single wild plant to be removed from its forest. Whether that legal supply will ever outcompete the black markets, the file does not yet know. The flower itself offers nothing to the insect that enters it, only the appearance of a reward, and a passage with no way back out except through the very structure that guarantees its survival. It is a species built on the logic of scarcity and deception working in its favor. It is difficult not to notice how closely that mirrors what happened to it once humans discovered it too. A law meant to close the door only made what was behind it more valuable. The rarer the orchid became, the more certain someone was to go looking for it. Some traps are built by evolution. Others, it seems, are built by the very systems meant to offer protection. This file is now closed. If you enjoyed exploring this forgotten chapter of botanical history, subscribe to Ancient Food Files. New files are added regularly, revealing the surprising stories behind the plants and foods that quietly changed the world. Until the next file is opened, thank you for watching.